Carson, Leno, Fallon. Now, it's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today with beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with noted celebrity sommelier Marc Kauffman. Introductions in just a moment. Wine Talks, of course, available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you hang out for your podcasting. And this episode is sponsored by Total Wine & More, where you love what you find and find what you love. But not while we're here today. We're going to have a conversation with Marc about all things wine. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
You know, we've been exchanging quips and posts and things on LinkedIn, and it's great to have you in Southern California.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's actually the first time since the pandemic that I've been down here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I've been here the whole time.
Shame on me.
Yeah, that's right. What are you doing here?
I am here to do some consultation with a friend of mine who owns a wine brand called Vampire Vineyards, as a matter of fact. We're doing some long-term planning. Yeah, Michael Machado, I think you know him.
Yeah.
And also to visit a friend of mine who owns a small plot of land up in Ojai where she produces a Dolcetto, which just won a gold medal at the Sommelier's Choice Awards.
Really?
Yeah, Pacific View Vineyards it's called. And
interesting
it's
varietal
the only one
for
she
that.
makes is a California Dolcetto. She's been making it for about 5 years.
Are Italian varietals popular in the Ojai area? That's sort of that inland valley.
There's a few plantings of Dolcetto and Sangiovese and Barbera around there, but she specializes in Dolcetto.
Used to be rather popular in Paso back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they got away from that, and now into more. Well, it seems like the hot side, Highway 46 is mostly Bordeaux varietals.
Right, more Cabernet,
right.
Merlot, and
But
things.
on the cold side of this 101 side is more. But it's interesting how the varietals sort of tend to evolve. Do you think it's a consumer thing, or the farmers are doing this?
Well, I think part of it's a climate change thing. I know in Napa, there are people looking at a lot of different warm weather type varietals.
Yeah, that's true.
Not only the Italians, but some of the Spanish as well.
Well, even Bordeaux putting Touriga Nacional or something.
Yeah, exactly. Bordeaux just authorized, I think, 6 new grape varieties.
Imagine that.
Yeah, who would have thought? Right?
Well, it's, we'll touch on that just a little bit. The climate change with the grape varieties and the world of wine is certainly affecting many regions. In some ways, it's positive in places like Sussex in England.
Oh, yeah.
Where they're able to grow grapes now and make really world-class sparkling
wine that, you couldn't have had 20 years ago.
But this is like, and I got in trouble for saying this once, that this is not a political show, but I was reading a book about Burgundy. It was actually about the war and how bad the 1940 vintage was in Burgundy because they had hail like in June.
Right.
Long before all this discussion of climate change. I mean, it seems to.
Well, there's always been peculiarities in weather, especially in Europe, that have affected the vintages.
So
Yeah,
I think
that we haven't seen that much here in California. The weather has been more stable up until climate change.
So you haven't seen much differentiation or harvesting or planting or farming changes because of climate change in Napa yet?
I think it's coming, but you know what it takes to replant a vineyard and to just acknowledge that you have to make a change. I mean,
that's true.
The wine industry doesn't like to do that.
No.
So
and it's only, I say this a lot, but it's interesting to me. It's such a slow industry, not because the people are slow, but you only get one chance a year. It's not, avocados at least have 2 harvests a year, right? But you only get one harvest a year to try, right?
Yep.
And I've noticed that some vineyards, for instance, Louis Jadot has this large swath of land where they've planted, I don't know how many rows of vines where they're testing all this stuff.
Right. A lot of the larger producers, both here and in Europe, are testing a lot of different varieties now. Yeah.
You call yourself the noted celebrity sommelier, and I was always intrigued by this. And you have quite a few acronyms behind your name, but what's the impetus of the noted celebrity sommelier?
Well, I was on 2 reality TV shows about wine. Yeah, the Winemakers for PBS season 2, and another one called Best Bottle, where I got to show off as a sommelier. That was what I did.
That's kind of interesting.
It was fun, and I really was a sommelier before they even started using the word. I worked in the restaurant industry back in Texas, back in the 1970s, and that's where I really learned about wine. I had gone to the University of Bordeaux actually for college for a year.
Wow!
Just by accident. I spoke French.
Says no one ever.
Yeah. I was given a choice. I was going to University of Colorado in Boulder. They had a study abroad program. They said, well, why not go there for a year? And it just happened to be in Bordeaux. And out of the window of my dorm room, I could see the vineyards of Chateau Haut-Brion.
Wow.
Yeah. So I went over. It was September. I looked around. I met a guy who seemed to be in charge, who happened to be Émile Peynaud, the famous winemaker of Chateau Haut-Brion, and asked him in my broken French, what's going on here? Stupid Américain, c'est le vendange. It's the harvest.
C'est le vendange, absolument.
Showed me what was going on. I liked what I saw. I got to taste some amazing wines while I was there. I was drinking Lafite, Latour, Haut-Brion when it was $15 a bottle.
What year was this?
And this was 1968, 69.
Wow, that's interesting. Just before sort of the difficulties that Bordeaux was going to have.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And when I came back to the U.S., I didn't even find out we made wine here.
Wow.
How interesting. Really? So I kind of started at the top with my wine tasting experience. And when I got back from school, I went to work in a restaurant. And because I had been to Bordeaux, the owners of the restaurant assumed I knew a lot about wine. Mm-hmm. So they put me in charge of their wine program. And at that time, they had 3 restaurants. And by the time 5 years later, when I was director of their beverage operations, we had about 15 restaurants.
So this is before Texas. The sort of the cuisine change in America, which
Absolutely.
is the mid 80s.
Yep.
So they would do that. They would say, "Oh, you've been in France, you must know a lot about wine." And so the wine program at a restaurant in those days probably wasn't as specific as it is today.
It was certainly not as specific or as voluminous.
Yeah.
Most wine lists back then were the French wines. They had B&G, Beaujolais, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, Bordeaux. They had Paul Masson.
Right.
They had Gallo Hardy Burgundy.
Rhine wine.
And things, and Blue Nun.
And Blue Nun.
Those were
Lancers
the wines.
and Matus.
And Lancers, of course, Lancers and Matus. I actually introduced boutique California wines to the Houston, which is where I was based, Houston, Texas restaurant market. Yeah. With the group that I was working for, we were the first ones to bring in Kenwood and a bunch of small wineries that were then part of a group called Bon Vin. Bon Vin importers, Charlie Finkel.
So, that's just a different era, and it's an important
totally
part
different
of, in this picture behind you, my father and I, that's exactly the time. We'll talk about that in a minute, but, the term sommelier really is defined. It should, I think personally, the definition probably hasn't changed. There's certifications and WSET and all this stuff that you go through to learn more. But you can learn those things on your own. You don't have to go through some certification to understand that. And tasting wine is probably the most important part of all of this, just to understand. But back then, they didn't exist. I think the Court of Sommeliers was established in 60-something.
Yes, there was actually, little known fact, there was a wine school at Neiman Marcus.
Really?
Yeah, Neiman Marcus had a big wine department back in those days. Now they're no longer in the wine business. They got out of it. But this was in Houston, where I was in Texas, and their main competition was the Sakowitz Company, which was a very upscale department store. And Bob Sakowitz was a real wine aficionado, and he actually ran, to my knowledge, what was the first wine auction ever run in the United States.
Wow.
And it was in 1970 or 71 back in Houston, and I helped organize that auction. I got to unpack all the wines as they came in, and Michael Broadbent was the auctioneer.
Right, yeah.
From Christie's. I got to meet Sir Michael.
That's amazing.
And this is something I'll never forget. I tasted the 1869 vintage Chateau d'Yquem. There were 3 bottles. This was a lot in the auction, and the way it came about, as I was unpacking all these wines from their original, all the straw
Yeah.
and, the way they were shipped back then. They didn't have styrofoam. One of the 3 bottles, the neck was broken off. The liquid was still in the bottle, but the neck was broken. Well, I called Sir Michael at his hotel, and I told him, I said, we have one of these bottles is damaged. We can't have it in the auction. He said, don't do anything. Wait, I'll be right there. And he jumped in a cab, came over, came into the warehouse, took him back. He looked at it, this way and that way, kind of this, and said, do you have any wine glasses? I said, do I? And 3 or 4 of us tasted that wine.
What a great story.
Incredible.
I'm very close to Bartholomew, his son.
Great.
And I have a Hubline auction paddle. It's probably around here somewhere.
I have about 6 of the old Hubline auction
when Michael
catalogs. Yeah.
My dad body chem from one of those auctions.
Yeah.
But had to stand in line to get a quarter of an ounce tasted. They used to open them back then. What a great story.
Yeah. Those were very different days in the wine business. But the sommelier thing, we were referred to more as just waiters that knew a lot about wine or things like that.
Was the word somm even around?
No, not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I got my certification from the court in the year 2000.
Do you think it's diluted?
Somewhat.
I mean, the idea of a somm, and there's 2 pieces that I see in that. One of them is that question, which is, man, now everybody, even the entry level wholesale rep has to have a WSET 1 or 2 just to get a job, and sometimes I feel like they just got those degrees or certifications because they got a job, and they don't really care that much. So that's the dilution of it, because they don't really care. And then there's the idea that I want to study this subject, and I want to learn more, and I want to go as far as I can with it.
Right, exactly. Well, and my end of it came through working in restaurants. And for the Court of Master Sommelier certifications, you have to work in restaurants. Whereas WSET is classroom.
Yes.
And you can learn a lot, absolutely, a very, very valuable education. But you cannot get the certifications moving up for the court unless you are actively in the restaurant business. So when I was in the business, I did that. But that's why I'm not a master sommelier, because I'm not in the restaurant business anymore. But I do a lot of wine tastings now for a company that's what they do, is corporate wine tastings. Among my other activities.
To me, that's the most important part, right? I think that, yes, if you want to learn wine and you don't know how to go about it, you don't want to just randomly pick a book off the shelf and start reading. In fact, I'm finding huge education now going through my dad's catalog of books and finding books that were written 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. And so their baseline is different than the ones written today, right? So they go back from that point. Get some really interesting conversations about some of the old but the idea to study wine, and this is what this podcast is for, is to help people sort of unwind it. I don't think, and I don't like when people say, I'm going to demystify it, or I'm going to make it easy, because it's not easy.
It's not easy. No.
And it's never going to be easy.
No.
It's a passion.
And when I talk to people about the confusion that exists in wine, the bottom line that I give them is what you really want to find out is what you like.
Mm-hmm.
That's the important
That's
thing.
The bottom line.
And nobody can make you wrong about that, because
That's
it's
right.
what you like. And
Even if it's bad.
And that's, sometimes you meet the judge or the sommelier that says, oh, no, you can't have it that way because of this and that. That's BS. It's got to be about what you like. But it's kind of a good news, bad news thing, because, well, the bad news is there's so many wines out there that you just have to keep tasting different wines till you figure out which ones you like. But the good news is there's so many different wines out there that you just have to keep tasting different wines till you find out which ones you like. So,
well, but it's a tough road. I want to get into your corporate tastings here to find out what people want to know, on the front lines. But look, your friend that makes dolcetto out of Ojai, that's a hand sell. That's what we call in the industry a hand sell. You can't walk into a restaurant or a store and say, not too many people can say I'd like a dolcetto from Ojai.
No,
they're not going to say I like a dolcetto, let alone.
Exactly. That's why she only makes a couple of hundred cases a year.
I think an important part for the listeners is that the lesson that she's learned, which she can only sell so much, so she can only make so much, and the Wine of the Month Club survived for 50 years, and maybe 35 of it, because it's not a widget that you make and throttle the manufacturer of.
Exactly.
You're going to make it, and then you got to sell it. And if you don't
Exactly.
sell it, the price is going to come down, et cetera, et cetera. So,
well, I think it was Robert Mondavi who said the lesson you learn in making wine is it's easy to sell the first 100 cases. You sell those to your family and your friends.
right,
To sell the second 100 cases, you sell your soul to the devil.
right. That's great. I don't know that quote. That's a
Yeah,
great
that
quote.
was
So you do a lot of corporatation. I want
Yeah.
we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the bulk market. I want people to understand what that's about, because I think it's misunderstood, and some packaging. So when it comes to the corporate events, which you were talking off camera about post-COVID, during pendant,
Right.
that rather successful and rather voluminous in events, and you were doing 3 a day in some cases.
Yeah.
What
during
happens
COVID.
in these things? Let's just go walk through a typical one.
Well, the group would contact, in this case, the sommelier company, and we would send wine to each of the participants and a Zoom link that
Okay,
they
so
would then
I've
send
done a few of those during
Yeah.
COVID and post-COVID.
Right.
What do they
Same
want to know?
principle.
When you get them on, are they participating? And I want people to
Mine
understand
are mine are very interactive. I
Yeah.
drive participation, but I've done groups all the way from 12 up to as many as 100 at
Yeah.
a time. So it depends on the
That's
size
hard.
of the group. But during COVID, especially, what people wanted was entertainment. The wine, or in some cases we did whiskey tastings as well. That was really just secondary.
Yeah.
They wanted entertainment. They wanted knowledge as well, but they didn't want somebody to just sit there and sniff and swirl a glass and say, "Oh, this tastes like strawberries," or "This tastes like raspberries." They wanted some definite entertainment. So, and I have stories and anecdotes about my experiences and about different wines that I use, and
Isn't it about the
makes it
story? I
interesting.
mean, isn't that what we talk
absolutely,
about?
yeah, it's about the story.
Is the
Wine-
story, I got this wine for $3 on Groupon? Is that a story?
Not really, no. But there is the story about $2 Chuck.
Yeah,
I mean, people
it's a good
always
story.
are interested to find out about the history of that wine. And
I like to tell the story when people talk about $2 Chuck, and it's no longer $2.
it's
as we know.
$3.49 now,
$3.49.
yeah, here in
And
California.
it's Joe Franzia who
Yeah.
passed away.
Right.
But I like to tell the backstory, which is, he's a felon because of this.
Yes.
And people go, "What do you mean?" Even the reps for Classic Wines didn't know that this guy, and he's the first to tell you.
Right.
But interesting part of our industry, which is, there's a lot of shenanigans that go on. And I'm glad if you said that people don't want to see you swirling and sniffing.
Yeah. It's
Is that
it's so
propensity?
pomposity.
Pomposity, right?
Yeah. People think they're being talked down to.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem with wine, with the whole mystique about wine, and that's put off a lot of potential consumers.
So I just came up with this thought when I was having some conversations on the show, and it's almost as though we perpetuate that pomposity by doing those things and continuing to drive, not a wedge, continue to drive this mysterious part of wine and people away from it.
Well, there's
By
a
design.
lot of that goes on, but when you said you don't want to talk about simplifying because it's not simple.
Right.
Well, it's not. We don't want to dumb it down.
No.
But demystifying is different. It's about giving people a clue as to, how do you navigate that wine of wall that you're faced with. Well, wine has more consumer choices than any other product on earth.
It's true.
I mean,
What do you think about that?
It's
I just saw the vision of the wall at Vaughn's and Hermosa Beach
exactly
versus the wall of soap.
Yeah.
Or salad dressing.
Yeah.
It's twice or 3 times the size.
There are, I think there's over 20,000 different Cabernet Sauvignons, wines called Cabernet Sauvignon, that we have access to here in California.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And how do you choose?
There's
How do you?
no way.
That's the question.
Well, I'm a little more experimental than most, so I will look at the label. I will look at where it comes from because I've been to so many wine regions. I have an idea about what this might or might not taste like and what my interests are. But for the average consumer that hasn't done that research, it's really tough. I mean, I wouldn't want to be taking wine advice from Snoop Dogg.
No.
But
you listen to the podcast.
but advertising does influence the choices of consumers. I mean, that's why it's done. And social media. I mean, social media has driven a whole new set of circumstances around wine and wine choices. But and I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but it's also introduced a whole new generation of consumers, but not only to wine, but to all alcoholic beverages. And conversely, the traditional wine industry is slow to pick up on those consumers.
It is.
And I still talk to so many winemakers who say, wine in a can?
Yeah, right.
Oh my God. Well, 20 years ago, wine in a can didn't exist.
No.
Now you have to wait 6 months before you can even buy cans to put your wine in.
Is there's a packaging shortage?
Yeah.
I know that glass during COVID, when I bottled the last one I bottled, I was forced to take a screw cap because there were no cork bottles available.
Glass is because 2 of the largest glass plants in Europe were in Ukraine.
Oops.
That's why. Yeah, and we bottle wine in Italy, and we had the same problem.
So how much is a case now of bottles with
Well,
box?
it still depends on the volume and all that.
A case. It was like $6.50 a case for a while.
Yeah,
and then
it was. Yeah, it can be up to $10 or $12 a case now.
Added to the price. It's interesting for the consumers to understand that because wine is what's in the bottle is an important part of obviously the beverage and what we want to experience. But to get it into the bottle takes a little bit of a time, and then
there's all those steps that people don't normally think about that it goes through. You have to print labels, and there's a cost of paper and ink. Those have increased. The actual processing of the wine, running it through the bottling line and putting it into the bottles, that's a separate charge.
Yeah, right. It's a whole thing. Particularly, most wineries don't have their own
bottling lines, so they
rent
bring in a mobile line or something like that.
I have a niece, and she was an intern here, and she's helped me a lot with my social and other things, the ideas we've had to market the Wine of the Month Club at the time. She decided to start a salad dressing line, and she's always been in the kitchen. She's 19. She's always decided to now take her ideas and put them in a bottle or in a self-serve container thing. And so we went through the numbers the other day. It's almost identical to bottling a wine.
I'm sure.
Right? There's the co-packer cost. There's obviously the cost of the goods sold. There's the packaging. And so we went through, she wants to do a DTC thing, which, as you and I know in the wine business, was a very important part of surviving COVID, was skipping the wholesale side.
Because there were no restaurants. So,
right.
Your on-premise was dead.
I mean, even Cayman showed up here.
Really?
Silver Oak showed up here, which they'd never done that before.
Right. Fantastic.
But as we went through the whole thing, I said, what are you going to sell these for? She said, well, they're going to be $1.50 a pack, $18 for a bag of 12. I said, okay, let's work backwards. I go, I think maybe you're going to want to be on the shelf one day. DTC may not be the only way.
Leave room in there.
Yeah, so we calculated back, and there was. She goes, where do I make money? I go, welcome to the wine.
Yeah, right. How to make a small fortune in the wine business,
welcome
right?
To the wine
Start
business.
with a large
welcome
one.
To the salad dressing business.
Right.
So, on a daily basis, the noted sommelier, the noted celebrity sommelier, you got your hands in a lot of different things. I know that we talked about this before, but packaging, as well as education.
I have 3 primary clients that I consult for. The sommelier company, that group, and I do anywhere from 10 to 25 tastings a month, either in person in Northern California.
That's a lot.
Yeah, or virtually. And I was doing even more than that during COVID, and then it kind of tailed off for about 90 days or so, and we thought, well, maybe it's all going to go back to in person, but now the virtual is starting to come back. And I don't really know why. That's great, but...
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to hand this off to you because I just realized that you'd be perfect for this. My very first social network consultant, brilliant woman, this is years and years ago. I still up until changed ownership, used her charts that I used to manage social, and she went on to be a big marketeer at a big firm, a software as a service company. And for once a month, I get on with about 30 people. I do exactly what you do. I send them a bottle of wine. Mm-hmm. I speak 15 minutes, and I usually get some anecdote about the wine business, something they probably didn't know, and then they have their meeting afterwards.
Exactly. The format.
Right. It's a great opportunity for them to sort of share an idea, build some rapport, break the ice, because apparently, and I didn't know this till later, that many of the people that come on for any particular show have never been on the show before, sort of in the Zoom call. And they're all over the world.
Yeah.
Can't ship all over the world, but
right.
That's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah,
so what else? So that you do, but that's a lot to do.
It is. There's a lot of organization. I have a similar setup to yours, not near as grand as this, but in my office where I do the tastings. But I also consult with a large Italian winery that specializes in bulk wine. Mm-hmm. And they've been in business 60 years, family owned. They're in Emilia-Romagna,
which is for the geographically challenged.
Near
in Tuscany.
It's
just outside
next
Tuscany.
to Tuscany.
Right.
It's the next province from Tuscany.
Right.
Near the town of Bologna.
Right.
That would be the largest town
Isn't
nearby.
the Ferrari factory near there somewhere? I think on the way that
yeah,
direction?
It's not far. It's in Faenza.
Yeah,
which is one of the neighboring towns.
Hey, let's take a break for our sponsor, Total Wine & More. There's always something new to try at Total Wine & More. I love this place. The other day I was in looking for a Napa Red and stumbled across the Prosecco aisle and had to buy this Prosecco that was fabulous for under $8. A great alternative to other types of sparkling wines. And then there's French Rosé at under $7, which is incredible. A huge selection of Kentucky bourbon. And with these low prices, I had to get both the wines that I was looking at. With the lowest prices over 30 years, always find what you love and love what you find at Total Wine & More. You can't buy spirits in Virginia or North Carolina. Please drink responsibly, and you must be 21 to purchase. That's Total Wine & More. Check it out. Back to the show. I want to talk about bulk wine for a second. Sure. You and I were going to meet at the Bulk Wine Symposium in Northern California a couple of years ago.
Right.
We didn't make it for some reason. But my thought is somewhere around 80% of wine is probably bottled from a bulk producer. Does that make sense to you? Do you think it's that high?
I'm not sure.
Or non-estate. Let's just say non-estate.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of sale of wine in bulk that goes on before it gets into the bottle.
Yeah,
from all over.
I mean, I've had people sell me up to 95% of wine. And for the listeners, non-estate meaning you didn't plant the grapes and grow them and ferment them.
Right. You did grow them yourself. Yeah.
Because even amongst the big names, let's just call Mondavi or Treasury, anything owned by Treasury Wine Estates or any of these guys that you would regularly hear, Camus or Silver Oak, they don't necessarily grow all the grapes.
Right. The Wine Group, Bronco. Right. Yeah. I mean, they do own a lot of vineyards.
They do.
But they also buy a lot of bulk wine and sell it.
And I think what's happened, and maybe you can validate this, the idea of bulk wine has sort of gotten commingled with private label, which has gotten commingled with poor juice, which is commingled with, $1 per liter junk coming from Valencia, Spain, and bottled here in a fancy bottle, and then the consumer gets duped. I think all that sort of blended together.
Yeah, it has a bit. It has a bit for sure.
I think it's bad for the wine business.
That reputation is definitely. And that's why I only work with one company that's very high end. They produce the equivalent of what would be about 500,000 cases a year. And they sell, they're a good sized winery. Right. They sell in 20 countries around the world. And I've been working with them now for 6 years. And,
let's peel that back a little bit. Let's just say you and I, let's say your friend in Ojai, she got this vineyard, but she decided not to make the wine, right? So we have this quality grape coming from a plot of land in a very nice area of California, Italy. So for the listeners, what would you do? You would either sell the grapes to somebody that's crushing them, so you now no longer is it estate to the person that's crushing it. You can call it an estate wine. Or you crush them and you fermented them, but you don't bottle it yourself.
Right. Which is the case for this winery. This is Cantina Cortecchia. Right. Yes. They have their own vineyards, and they make wine, but they don't bottle it themselves. They sell it all to bulk, for mostly for private label. And in Europe, there's a big market for what's just called EU red and EU white, which are just blends, which go on the supermarket shelf at three or €4 a bottle.
Wow.
A
EU
liter and
red.
a half. Yeah, it's a classification. Yeah.
Is it really? So it can be anywhere in the EU. It can be Hungarian.
Exactly.
It can be
right. French, Germany, Spain, Austria. So they have a lot of wine to blend from. So they sell a bit to that market.
Yeah.
It's a pretty popular.
Would you liken that to? I can tell you the 100,000 wines we've tasted through here, maybe 2 of them were American. Meaning
Appellation American.
Yeah, appellated American.
Yeah, probably that would be the idea.
Yeah.
But I don't think the American appellation has really gone very far here, if it even still exists. Yeah.
It's sort of scary that you're going to blend, Virginia Chardonnay with, California, Central Coast Chardonnay or something. But I guess it's okay. But wouldn't that be the same thought process of taking some classified Bordeaux and blending it with?
No, not at all. And that's the thing about the winery that I work with in Italy. We know where all the wine is made. We know where it all comes from. So it's well handled and well supervised all the way up until it's put into the tank to be shipped to where it's going to be bottled. So in our case, we produce about 10 different wines: Sangiovese, Trebbiano, Moscato. We buy Pinot Grigio, so we buy and sell Pinot Grigio on the bulk market. But once it's shipped, in the big bulk market, the way it works, we ship in a tanker load that holds about 24,000 liters, which would bottle out to the equivalent of about 2,600 cases. And that can be divided into 2 wines.
Right.
Okay. So, but it's a big rigid plastic tank that goes inside a 20-foot shipping container.
Right. Isn't it called a Tetra Pak or Tetra Tank?
No, it's called a flex tank.
Flex tank. Yeah.
Tetra Pak is different. That's a carton
the box. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So for the listeners to understand, you've got sometimes these could be appellated. In other words, you could call it maybe a Tuscan red because.
Oh, absolutely. It has. Yeah. It can be.
Piemonte's, Langhe, Nebbiolo or something.
Nebbiolo. Yeah, absolutely. It's the grape variety, and it carries the appellation of the area where it was made, and all that is registered, governmentally, both in Italy and then with TTB here. You have to file the paperwork.
It's less expensive to do that. Let's say your winery near Bologna, you got an order for 24,000 liters of Sangiovese from the general Tuscan region. It is cheap, less expensive to put that in bring it to America, bottle it here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Savings is less. It's taxes. It's also just the cost of shipping glass and the amount of product you can get. In a 20-foot container, we're getting the equivalent of 2,600 cases of wine.
Wow.
If you bottle that wine and ship it in a container, you get 1,200 cases in a 40-foot.
Right.
So the savings there it works out to anywhere between actually about $6 to $8 a case.
Wow.
If you go, to bulk wine.
So for the listeners, it's important to know that wines, like we said, a huge percentage of wine is done like this. I actually, early on in the career of this company, when we were buying containers worth of wines, we brought in Argentinian Merlot that way, and we bottled it at San Antonio downtown.
Right.
And it was very successful and was very good. And so I thought this is the part that I want to make sure listeners and consumers understand, that it doesn't reflect the quality of the wine. It just reflects on its practicality on getting it here and keeping the price down. Because in the true sense of a negociant, if I'm the guy in Los Angeles that's receiving your wine that you've created,
right,
I'm deciding whether it's worth putting in the bottle. I want it to taste the way it tastes.
Exactly.
Right.
You're relying on the reputation of the label.
Right.
That the wine is going to be something that's good and worthwhile. Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of interesting the irony, because the lifestyle of Napa, and I had a woman on the show, Bettina. She's a broker. She's an M&A broker, basically for wineries all over Europe, and we have them here, of course, in America. But the idea that you want to own a winery and be the farmer and pick the grape, and find out when they're ripe and make the bottle, you have to bottle what you planted. The negociant under this scenario, whether it's a large winery or a small one, you get to decide.
They have a lot broader range and flexibility into into the success of what they're going to do. If you're in a state winery in Napa, you're limited to what happens in your vineyard during that growing season. Right. And
have you brokered in California wines as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
So are you acting as a broker for this agency, or are you representing
no,
clients?
I represent the agency to clients. Yeah.
So fascinating.
I connect them with bottlers and with private label users over here.
It's interesting that in the term private label, they started using white label recently as another version of that. And I always, whenever I bottled wine, I don't own a winery. I have a license to make it. It hangs at Wine Hooligans in Sonoma,
Right. And I do business with them.
We can find a unique wine and put it in a bottle, and I certainly am not allowed to put it under the Robin Mondavi's label.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's just not allowed.
Right.
The TTB, as you said, the federal government approves everything. They approved like 100,000 labels last year, right? So I can see when you were talking about 20,000 Cabernets on the shelf, that's confusing for the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of them are made by the same companies.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
So what's the real difference?
Yeah.
I mean, really, the bottom line, the only way you're going to figure it out is to just taste a lot.
So when you do these seminars and these corporate events, is that probably one of the big questions, right? That these people like, how do I choose wine at the market? And then how do I, follow somebody's palate, or how do I understand that Marc Kauffman is he's my go-to guy for the wines I like? Because sometimes, if I follow Suckling,
exactly. If you find a wine writer that recommends wines that are in tune with what you like, then that's great to follow those suggestions. But other than that, it comes down to basically trial and error.
Do you think it's gotten butchered? Do you think, again, we're talking about dilution here? Do you think that the rating system, you talked about Michael Broadbent, he used a 5-point system. That they didn't do that. My father used a 3-point system, oddly, to evaluate here at the Wine of the Month Club. Like 1, I can't use it. 2, great value for the price, and 3 was if the price came down to be good value.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very much got to be based on what the intention is, where you're going with it.
But there's like, and I know Jim Suckling. I've met them many times at different events and stuff. Man, it's just you walk down the aisle at the market and there's a shelf talker for everything. How do you? I mean, we're not going to peel this back again, but I mean, for the consumer, it's very confusing. I think I'm trying to get the consumers to go back to that wine shop, go back to the department manager at a market if they're reputable or not reputable, but have passion about this industry, and rely on that. I had a buyer in my old store here in Monrovia, one of the great palates of Southern California, and I would watch him when a customer came in and ask him, listen to the questions, make the recommendation based on that, and then that person comes back and says, that was fabulous.
That is the job of the sommelier.
Yeah.
In a nutshell. It's to find out what the customer likes and then point them in that direction and give them choices.
That's a tough job.
It is.
It's a tough job.
It is, especially in a restaurant setting. I'll take it back to a restaurant setting, but in retail, knowledgeable people are a real help. If you can go to a wine shop and find a knowledgeable person that can understand what you like and tell you about, in a way that you can understand what that wine tastes like, not going off into the ether about, things like that. But that's really the key. And in a restaurant situation, the sommelier has to be part psychologist, part teacher, part server.
The good ones.
The good ones, right. They do it all. And it's something that you learn over time, and also extending your range of tastes. I mean, learning by tasting different wines.
Is that 6-digit somm job that used to be in Vegas reality these days?
There are more master sommeliers in Las Vegas than any other state in the United States right now, because of all the high-end restaurants and the casinos. That's why they're there.
But there was a while there where those jobs dried up because the recessions and things, and it's just like
they did. And then when COVID hit, a lot of them had to pivot. Some of them went into retail. Some of them are maybe driving trucks now.
The poor wine angel at that Michelin star restaurant in I forgot the hotel now, but they had that giant center column that had four sides of wine.
Yeah,
things.
Oriole, I think that
something
was.
like that.
Yeah.
And the woman would put on her harness and she'd go
Right.
up and down.
Yeah. Yeah,
Seriously.
it can go to extremes.
It's like,
let's face it.
seriously, right? So the other day I was in Whole Foods, actually a couple summers ago. Well, let's go further back than that. About 10 years ago, maybe more, I received a 500 ml bottle of South African Merlot and I think a Pinot Grigio or a Chenin Blanc that was in a plastic bottle. And I still have them. They're disgusting because
they're probably not any good now.
No, the food, yeah. But the food grade coating has separated. So you see this gross thing. And alternative packaging has become a subject for not only weight and ease of shipping, but for Green Planet conversations.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that used to happen here all the time, which I used to love putting it back on the reps, is they'd bring this wonderful bottle of, let's say, Rubicon, it's a giant glass, and they go, look at this beautiful thing, and you hold it. It means something. It does change the impression when you hold that bottle.
And it
But
weighs
for
5 pounds.
Yeah, it was 5 pounds.
Right.
It was 2 more pounds to ship than the other one, and it cost me more money. So
Yeah.
I would tell the reps, big deal. But yeah, here you are, you have a flattened, is this glass or plastic?
That's plastic.
Plastic.
That's a PET bottle.
What is happening in that trade? And I'm just want to add one more story. In 1988 or 89 or 90, I had access to the very first foam cork manufacturing device, which was owned by Coca-Cola from Taylor Cellars. People don't know this. And it was here in El Monte in a storage room, and my uncle had worked on assembling the bar cap to the foam cork. So it's not a new technology at that point. But they were the ones that were on the market at that point were crushing during insertion. The cell structure was really bad. How is the evolution of packaging and wine going, and what are you seeing as headwinds?
Well, alternative packaging is just growing by leaps and bounds.
Is it?
I mean, bag and box has been growing steadily by 12 to 15% for the past 10 years.
Really?
Yeah, and the quality of the bags now, they have liners that keep the wine fresh 5 to 6 weeks, because the key to bag and box is the tap. The tap system, it's a one-way tap.
Mm-hmm.
It lets wine out but won't let air in.
Wow. That wasn't always the case
No,
necessarily?
it wasn't necessarily the case. The person that invented bag and box was a gentleman named Scholey in Chicago, and it was invented in the 1950s actually as a container for battery acid.
Oh, good.
And it had to go to Australia.
I've had wines that taste like that.
Well, it might have been. But in Australia is where they adapted it to being used for wine.
Mm.
And funny story, I've been to Australia many times to some of the packing operations there. Some of the college kids take the bags out of the box and play a game called the goon sack, where they just hold it up and see how much they can drink out of the bag itself.
Okay, that's funny.
Yeah. But there's a lot being done now with smaller size packages. For a while, the only bag and box you could find was the Franzia 5-liter bag and box. But now you can find 1.5 liter bag and box of pretty good quality wine.
I know that the quality's increased, and I did some tastings there. The funny thing is you got to open a 3-liter bag for a 2-ounce taste.
Well, but it'll last for 6 weeks in your fridge. So
I actually got a bag in the box not too long ago. It was a Bordeaux, and it was in a wood box, which was kind of add a little class to the idea.
That idea has come in and out a couple of times, trying to camouflage the cardboard itself.
So speaking of camouflage, then does it still carry that stigma that what's going to be in a bag in the box is probably not frontline merchandise when it comes to wine, just like the can operation. But is that changing too?
Well, can is a whole nother subject. Yeah.
So let's finish the bag in the box. We'll get in the can. So
but the bag in the box,
getting better.
The quality has definitely has definitely gone up. There are Delicato has a brand called Boda Box, which is one of the top selling brands and very high quality stuff. Black Box also is very
Black
good.
Box
They
you
win
see
medals.
a lot, but that's a big shelf spot too. Don't forget the marketing of this. You got to put on the shelf. It's going to take what would be 3 rows of bottles probably.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely. Well, and that's part of the reason that they're coming to a 1.5 liter size also.
And so you're in this industry. So what do you think about the difference in the romance of opening a bottle of wine now? Let's have the listeners understand that most wines open the first few weeks that it's bought.
Most wine
2
is
years for
consumed
sure.
within 48 hours of purchase.
Right. So, but those alternative packages that are not trying to resemble a bottle or a cork are really
They appeal to a whole different range of
group.
consumer
Yeah.
than what we grew up doing. Yeah, especially the cans.
Yes.
This is now the
How
younger,
is the can market going?
very strong. There's more coming out every day, but it's not only wine. It's actually competing with wine now because there's so many canned RTD cocktails and seltzers that are all getting into that
True.
that market, and it's the young consumer that would have been a wine consumer maybe 20 years ago that are now looking at these other drinks because they're not so much interested in having to learn how to use a corkscrew.
Right.
They're interested in being able to throw a can in their backpack and take it to the park,
Right.
which you can't do with a glass bottle.
No.
Or take it in your kayak when you're kayaking on San Francisco Bay and you get to Angel Island and you can pull out a can of something.
I get it. I get that. I don't see it. I don't see, like, my generation. I was a surfer. I ride my bike. I'm a road biker. Whatever I do outdoors, I have no intention or even a thought to bring along an alcoholic beverage.
We don't, but the mindset has changed.
But that's different.
There are definitely a whole range of consumers now, and the traditional wineries are having a problem realizing that. And I'm not saying that Opus One should go put wine in cans. Not at all. Not at all. But there's a definite market for
Opus 2.
Yeah. Opus 2.5.
Well, I've had the privilege actually here to taste both a rosé. I think it was a rosé that was bottled in glass and simultaneously bottled in can, and the wines were different. There was no flaw in either one of them, but they definitely had a slightly different character about them, and I don't think one was better than the other. And I think that's an important question in a lot of consumers' minds: does it taste different? And up until recently, and my experience was a couple of years ago, before COVID, I tasted about 100 cans, and I picked 5 that were, they weren't really appellated. There was 1 or 2. They weren't really vintaged. Most of them had high levels of sulfur. At least that's what came off of the can. But that changed a little bit.
Yeah. There's been lessons learned
Yeah.
now in how to specifically produce wine if you're going to put it into cans. And one of them is to use a lot less sulfur.
Yeah.
And another one is maybe carbonate it and definitely sweeten it a little bit.
Yeah, there's been some slight effervescence of some of them. Certainly many have gone to sparkling rosés and things like that.
Right.
But I did find during COVID then, I asked for the same idea from all the brokers and all the reps, bring me your cans. And many of them were the same vintage, the same as the previous one I tasted a year ago. So nobody was being aggressive during COVID for that, obvious reasons. The next year, though, I did get a lot, but I did definitely get more appellated reds. I had a Lodi Cab, Freak Show. I had a Pinot Noir from Monterey. It was gorgeous. Forgot the name of the brand. And so I started seeing appellated vintage stuff. What's interesting to me, maybe you can shed some light on this, is, they've picked, 4 or 5 sizes, a 200, a 250, a 375, a 500. Now you get into 500, that's almost a bottle of wine now. Seems kind of ridiculous to me. For the listeners, size of a large beer. Are they settling on sizes?
Well, the TTB has authorized more sizes.
Oh, they have.
Now.
So that's
So you
That's all
can
we
do,
needed.
because before you couldn't do 200 as a single sale. You
Right.
could only do it if it came out to be a liter. You
Oh,
couldn't
I
do
see,
a
yeah.
250 unless you did 3 of them together in a 750.
for 750.
But now they've changed that. Now there's individual sizes because there was just so much demand
That's interesting.
for that. But I don't know about putting really high end varietals in cans. That wouldn't be my first choice.
There's no intersection of the consumer that would want Camus in a
No, definitely. I can say that pretty much unequivocally.
Yeah.
No, at this point. But these wines are meant for early consumption. The same with all alternative packaging. These are not wines that you're going to put in your cellar for 10 years.
No.
These are wines that are going to be consumed within 6 months.
What would happen if you put it in your cellar for 10 years? Think it would survive?
Probably not, because the can has a liner,
Yeah.
and it's a plastic-based liner,
Yeah.
and the acid in the wine will eventually affect that
Work on
liner,
it.
but not for the first year or two. It's stable. And that's actually a test that the can manufacturers will run with the winery before they will sell the cans to the winery.
Mm-hmm.
They have to test
Mm-hmm.
each product,
Well, look,
which is great.
when I worked for Xerox in 1982, I sold copiers to the company that manufactured the machines that 7-Up used to can 7-Up. And that's very acidic. It's got
Right.
bubbles in it. It's got a CO2.
Right.
So those, that technology's been around for a while.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's not new. And we've been drinking. What's interesting to me is that people say, oh my God, cans are, you've been drinking stuff out of cans forever, and you've been drinking plastic water out of plastic bottles.
Yep.
So tell me about this flattened. This looks like the bottle you see when you go to the LA County Fair, and the guy with a booth, and he smushed all the gin and vodka bottles.
Oh, yeah,
in their
selling them
hand.
as souvenirs.
Yes.
Yeah. This is funny. This is not yet available in the U.S. It's called the Pacamama flat bottle, and it was actually created just a few years ago in the U.K. because when you put a box around this bottle, it actually goes through the mail slot.
Wow.
In the door in the UK, and in the UK you can send wine through the post,
yeah.
right? So that's why was the creation of it. But it really caught on. This is made out of recycled PET plastic, so it's not new production, which is great for the planet. It's recycled. It contains an oxygen barrier in the plastic. It doesn't separate from the plastic, so it's an integral part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it will give the wine a shelf life of anywhere from about 18 months to 2 years.
Mm. And it's a 750 or 500?
And this is a 750 ml.
Wow.
Yeah. So just in shipping alone, if you can imagine, a case of wine would be this big. And
Well,
it would weigh,
pound, right?
Yeah. And it would weigh.
So you think that's valuable?
2/3.
Because we've had this discussion before with other people. If a plastic bottle of wine is a pound and a glass bottle is 3 pounds roughly,
Right.
and so in 36 pounds I can get 12 bottles or I can get 36 bottles.
Yeah.
And this obviously is saving space.
Right.
So I'm a restaurateur.
Well, now on premise is a little different. I see this much more for retail rather than on premise. On premise, what you're seeing is kegs, wine by the glass coming out of kegs. That's the real eco-friendly solution for on-premise. I don't see PET so much for on-premise.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I figured behind the gate, behind the counter, or behind the curtains, as it were, the bartender pours from a plastic bottle.
If you're pouring by the glass, a lot of them are pouring from bag and box.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bag and box, but not so much from PET.
There's no corkage here. There's no corking. There's no cork.
It
taint.
takes a screw cap.
It's a screw cap.
Right.
So there's no cork taint. There's no organic matter.
And this is a plastic screw cap, which recycles along with the bottle. If you put a metal screw cap on a plastic bottle, most of the recyclers will just send it to landfill, and that defeats the whole purpose. But with plastic, it can be reused. This can also go on a glass bottle, on a screw cap bottle, and doesn't have to be
And it looks like that's
sorted.
for the listeners. We're looking at what looks like. You would have to look at it really closely not to think this is just a regular old tin cap.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But it's a screw cap made of plastic, and it actually acts as the.
It's called a Nova Twist, and it's made in France. And you can actually apply it by hand to the bottle, which you can't do with a metal closure. It takes a $60,000 machine.
Are you repping these things in America?
Yeah, I've been working with them since their invention. These were actually created when I worked at Tetra Pak. They've been in the market 20 years.
Wow.
They're now produced by a French company called Solo.
What's the general American reaction from the winery standpoint?
So far, it's been very positive. We've got over 200 wineries using these, and they love them.
Really? Yeah. I have not seen one on the shelf yet.
There's mostly they're used in the lab for bulk wine and for hand application, but there's several brands that are coming out with them now. You'll be
Do
seeing
they make
them.
a 500 and a 375?
They'll fit. They'll fit any bottle.
In this bottle?
Yeah. This bottle, no, is only a 750.
Yeah.
But there is available, I believe, 375s and 1 liter in round in the traditional wine bottle shape.
So what was interesting to me when I was at Whole Foods, that's how I started this segment here, was it was called Pool Boy.
Yes, Pool Boy. It had this closure on it.
Yeah.
It had the Nova Twist closure on it.
Well, I always wanted to be the Pool
imported
Boy.
by Whole
You never
Foods.
know who you're going to run into when you're cleaning somebody's pool, right?
Exactly. Well,
My
there
wife
was a
wouldn't
rosé that was in a 1 liter plastic bottle.
Okay, so that was the confusion for me, and I'm in this industry, all this time, and I walk up and I see it. It looked like a 750 glass bottle.
That's been the problem with traditional shape plastic bottles. They look smaller because the wall is much thinner than glass. So the way it needs to be merchandised is completely separately.
Yes.
And there has to be signage on it to explain to the customer, this is a plastic bottle. This is not glass. It's
Well, not only that, for me, getting a liter's worth of wine in a bottle that looks like 750 is another 25%. So, wow, that from a bargain. But I don't know if consumers read anything. I mean, so I walked up to the Pool Boy wall, and I haven't seen it since that summer, whatever it was, a few years ago. I'm looking at it going, wow, this is interesting. And I grabbed it with plastic. Then I realized it's a liter. I mean, I don't think Americans even know the difference between a liter and a 750 anyway.
very rarely, right. They have to be told.
It seems like a tough road to hoe.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you put the 750 out there and it looks smaller.
Exactly. Right. But if they're floor stacked, if you put it on the shelf, it won't sell. Forget it. Yeah, it's got to be separately stacked and with signage to explain what it is. But it's coming. There's a new consumer out there who doesn't just automatically look for the glass bottle and the cork. So
we had dinner the other night with some friends. They just got out of the restaurant business. It's called the Raymond. It's a great restaurant, and they are into the ready-to-drink RTD cocktails. And they have one called Knox. I think it's Knox and Lander. I can't remember the name exactly. But what they did is they got this beautiful octagonal bottle, but maybe it's a perfume bottle, maybe it's not. And they created a molded bar cap, which I thought was brilliant. So there's no pieces to assemble as the old days. And it's a very elegant, English sort of name. And I did a taste test with my son-in-laws. One of them loved brown liquor. I'm not sure it's a good thing or a bad thing. And so they gave me a 4-pack. One of them was a gin martini. One was some special bourbon cocktail, one Manhattan, and one old fashioned. So I consider myself rather an expert on gin martinis and Manhattans. So I made mine, and we did a blind test between my two son-in-laws and myself. My martini, I won both, thank goodness. But the martini was very close. I mean, it was really, really close. And I use Hendrix and Noy Pratt, and I make sure that it's 6-1, all that. But I was impressed with the quality of this RTD cocktail. The Manhattan was very good too. The freshness of it, because either maybe the vermouth, the sweet vermouth, whatever. Mine was much brighter, much more approachable. I guess that's not a good word for Manhattans, but
drinkable.
It was very good. I gave them some recommendations, and then their old fashioned I thought was a little too orange, but still clearly quality, right?
Right.
Is that an important part of doing this? Is making sure what's in that glass and then that bottle and that can is quality?
Is quality? Well, only if you want a second sale.
Yeah. I suppose that would make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure
are the RTD drinks tough? Are they tough to sell too? I mean, I don't see this around.
It's growing.
High Noon wasn't Southern have a high noon or something?
Yeah, and there's Cutwater. There's like a couple of hundred different.
And I suppose
coming
I could
into
see
that now. And again, it's a lot of it appealing to this younger generation of consumer. Again, about the portability issue, and that they don't want to have 20 bottles of 750 milliliters of different expensive alcohols. They don't have the same income level.
That's a good point.
So for $5, they can buy a cocktail that they can enjoy at home that would cost them $15 at a restaurant.
You saw that liquor in my conference room was waiting for consumption.
And right.
It's not inexpensive.
Exactly. I have the similar situation at home.
They probably won't put Pappy Van Winkle in a bottle, but I mean, it can.
Yeah, you're not going to find an RTD with Pappy Van Winkle, a 17-year-old, anytime soon. If you do, beware. Let's put it that way.
I had a podcast with with BB last week, 2 weeks ago, and his background talks about his first time he had a glass of George Latour, and it happened to be 1968.
Oh, wow.
George Latour being the premium brand back when it was still family owned. And when you talked about you won't see Pappy in a young man's, single serve glass soon. When we sold the liquor store, my father sold liquor store, the buyers wanted nothing to do with the premium wines. And so we had this, we had a vertical of George Latour at the time, like 68 to 75 or something. I can't remember what it was exactly. And I had moved it around many times, moving the company. But one day my manager's coming to work, and we're in South Bay now in Lomita, and there's our employee standing on the corner, like holding two bottles like this. And she pulls out, she goes, "What are you doing?" And they happened to be 1968 George Latour. And I thought to myself, I told my wife, I said, he has no idea what a great wine he was holding there. He was just stealing it. He was just happy to steal it. Of course, he got fired, and I got the wine back. but just this vision of the guy standing like this, waiting for a ride with two bottles of George Latour, amazing. We're already past an hour, and we have so much to talk about. Tina, I hope we can do it again.
I look forward to it. Absolutely.
I'm gonna close this with this, my favorite subject, and since you're
super
travel the world of wine and you understand this is a book called Wine is the Best Medicine. It's written by Dr. E.A. Murray, who was an MD in France in the 70s, as well as a homeopathic doctor. And so I think this sort of bridges the gap between homeopathy and modern medicine. So here's a list of human ailments and a French wine that can cure that, or at least relieve the symptoms of it.
Oh, fantastic.
Right? So I'm going to give you the ailment. I'm going to give you 3 opportunities. And this is much like the Master of Wine or the Master Somm test. Why you chose that answer maybe as important as
the answer itself. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
All right. What a challenge.
So let's talk about hypertension. Since I just had a clean bill of health. So if you had hypertension, you could have and we're going to talk about the dosage too. A Beaujolais, a young Beaujolais, a Sancerre, or a Saint-Emilion. 3 different parts of the world. So hypertension, feeling your heart's pumping out of your chest. How do you fix that with a Beaujolais, a Sancerre, or a Saint-Emilion? What do you think?
Wow. Well, my go-to would be the Saint-Emilion. The reasoning being it has a little more complexity and requires you to sit down and contemplate and slow down a little bit more. Whereas Beaujolais is young, vibrant, fruity, makes you want to stand up and dance.
I'd buy that answer.
Thank you.
But it's wrong.
Oh,
so,
okay.
and I was struggling here because there's something called hypotension.
Oh.
But this is called hypertension.
All right.
And so the answer was Sancerre, or Pouilly Fumé.
I was going to get to that. Cool.
Or an Alsatian white.
Interesting.
However, the Saint-Emilion, if you're suffering from menopause, is what they're telling you here. But here's the reason. High blood pressure is not necessarily followed from excessive wine drinking. The normal and reasonable use of wine must be systematically excluded in this case. Okay, so he says, because these wines are diuretic.
I was going to say it probably has to do with the minerality.
Yes, and so they cause a release of urea chlorides and uric acid. Therefore, they help eliminate the excess organic fluid, which promotes blood plethora. Unfortunately, this is good. So what do you think the dosage is?
A couple of bottles? I don't know.
Well, it depends. Let's see. It depends on what bottle you're using, but it's
8 ounces.
2 glasses per meal.
2 glasses per meal. So 8 to 12 ounces.
Yeah. That's not a bad thing. Now, it does say in the book, anecdotally, that we're not sure the reason this helps, except that you always feel better with a couple glasses of wine.
Well,
anyway.
now that's the actual answer that we're looking for, Paul. Yeah, definitely.
It's been a pleasure having you here, and I hope we can do it again. And good luck with your trip down
Absolutely.
here as you're doing your thing.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to Wine Talks with Paul Kalamkarian. Don't forget to subscribe because there's more great interviews on their way. Folks, have a great time out there in the wine world. Cheers.